Welcome to the Medical Manners Podcast, where I give healthcare providers simple tips for ways they can transform the way they connect with their patients and colleagues. Connecting with patients isn't some secret sauce that some of us have and others don't. They're just skills, implemented consistently over time. If you want to transform your medical practice, you're in the right place. I am Katie Wyatt, your host. This podcast episode is sponsored by the Connect Better course. This is an audio course for medical providers who want to transform the way they connect with their patients. If you're an individual provider or you have a team of providers who is hoping to improve your patient satisfaction scores, improve your job satisfaction, and boost the prosperity of your practice, this course is for you. It's a 6-week course with an area of focus each week that will teach you specific skills, phrases, actions, and formulas to change the way you connect with your patients. Visit medicalmanners.com and use the promo code PODCAST for 10% off this course. Well, Scott, Dr. Abramson, thank you for taking time. Scott.
Yeah.
Scott. Well, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to meet with me today. I'm excited to talk to you. Give my listeners a quick introduction to yourself. Who are you? What do you do? How did I get connected with you?
Okay. I'm retired now. I've been retired for 5 years, but for 40 years, I was a frontline neurologist in the Kaiser Permanente system in Northern California. And during that time, for the last 20 years of that 40 years, I was very, very actively involved in our physician communication mission at Kaiser. During that time at Kaiser, when I was involved in the communication mission, and we can talk about what we did and so forth, but every month, I would write an article about communication issues for our 10,000 strong Kaiser Permanente members, doctors. And over time, and then when I retired and COVID hit, I had a lot of time. I took a lot of those articles, the accumulation, and I wrote them up, revised them, and Publisher Covenant Books in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, published a book entitled Bedside Manners for Physicians and Everybody Else, What They Don't Teach You in Medical School or Any Other School. And so this book is actually a compilation of those articles. And I think actually, I don't even know how did you get the book? I don't know.
Yeah, well, about a year ago, I decided I wanted to read everything there was out there on how to connect with patients better. So I just got on Amazon or Google. I don't even know where I went. And I just typed in books on bedside manners. And probably 20 of them came up. Yours was one of them. I just ordered them all. And I had a huge shipment of books come. And I've just been slowly working my way through reading these books. And I will say, I've only probably made it through 3 of them. But your book was so easy to read. Some of the other books read like a textbook, so they took me a while to get through. Your book, I was like breezing through it because it was fun. It was stories. It was so relatable that I could read it a lot faster. And I know I told you about this when we talked before, but this is my book. And these are all of my sticky notes because I put a sticky note on something I wanted to remember. I mean, there's probably 20 of them. But that's when I was like, I have got to reach out to this man and have a conversation with him because this stuff is gold. And I can tell that you were good at doing this with patients. So that's how I got your book.
Oh, I see. Wow, that's amazing because God, I'm not like the sticky note king or something. But you're right. I made it. It's a series of vignettes, a series of stories, and each one I think has some sort of message about communication. And I think it is easy to read. It really is. And you don't have to go in order. You can just open the book to any chapter and read any story and skip around. So it really is. I think it really is easy to read. I know what you mean. Some of these communication books are so academic. It's really hard. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I loved yours because it's not rocket science connecting with others. And so if you've got to read a textbook, I don't know that anyone's ever going to do it, but I think everyone could read your book and say, oh, actually, that's easy. Actually, that's something I could do. That's something I could change. So I thought your book was really relatable. Just because physician communication is not the term that my hospital chain uses. And so I don't know that everyone's going to know what that means as far as kind of what you were doing the last 20 years.
Okay. Most of what we were doing was teaching physician, or you could substitute clinician patient
Mm-hmm.
communication. That's what most of it was. But we also branched out and we did physician to physician communication. We did programs on physician to staff communication. We
Mm-hmm.
did programs on related to work-life balance. We did programs on the challenges of medical marriage. We did programs on the threatening patient and several other types of programs, but the main emphasis was on clinician or physician patient communication.
Perfect. Okay. And I was impressed by Kaiser because you started doing this back before hospitals were reimbursed for patient satisfaction scores. I mean, Kaiser really put an emphasis on this back before it was the thing. It's kind of the thing now, right? But it wasn't when you guys started it.
Absolutely. And we started this really almost 25, 30 years ago, right before it became the in thing to do. And we had a very, very forward-looking leader. Dr. Robbie Pearl was our CEO. And this was I think the real beauty of it. He said, like I said, we had 10,000, we have about 30 different hospitals, about another
Huge system.
50, huge system in Northern California, 10,000 physicians. And instead of like going to, some academic place and saying, develop us a program on patient communication, and then we will tell our doctors what to do. What
Mm-hmm.
he did and what we did at Kaiser, he said, look, this is an important thing. We need to communicate with our patients. And we want physician volunteers who will volunteer to take on this mission. We will give you time. We will give time for your clinicians. And you develop the programs. Put your heads together, develop the programs, and, go to it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the time off, here's the money behind it. And so so we basically had about 30 odd different committees, and each hospital had a separate committee. And that committee was in charge of developing a program, programs. And we would institute those. And then we would meet maybe every 3 months, all the different facilities and the communication leaders at each hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And we would share our best practices. We would steal from each other. And that way we really did, I think, develop such a robust and effective communication program.
Well, that is awesome. And at the time when you were working and doing this, you're a neurologist by training. So you were seeing patients in your neurology clinic and you were also doing this as well, correct?
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you're okay with it, and actually I know you're okay with it because this was your idea, you asked me to pick some of my favorite
Yeah.
topics from your book and we just kind of talk about it. So if you're okay with it, we'll just kind of get into that. The first one I thought we'd chat about was the story called The Doctor Made Me Feel So Happy.
Oh, yes. 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 Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. And here's the thing is all of these stories come from my own interaction with patients, or stories that my fellow colleagues tell me, or patients tell me, or sometimes even it's people that are not even patients at Kaiser or my patients, but people that know when they know you work at Kaiser and they see you at Starbucks or something, they tell you their own Kaiser,
Yeah.
sometimes horror story.
Yeah.
So so the one you mentioned is The Doctor Made Me Feel So Happy.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing that this woman is a patient of mine, and it's a very sad case. She has this neurodegenerative disease. No one knows the cause. There's no cures. You just go, this poor lady just went downhill. She's got a wheelchair. She has to be fed by her husband. She has to change her diapers. And, they were very simple people. He was a longshoreman. And they came to see me. I was about the seventh neurologist they saw, and I'm looking over the chart, and the poor guy couldn't remember hardly anything about what this was or what the doctors told him or anything, except he said there was one doctor. There was one doctor, one neurologist he saw. I said, this guy is this guy was such a gem. He's a prince. I love this man. And I'm in the communication business, and I'm wondering, what did this doctor do that, he can remember his name? He loves the guy. What did he do? And so I looked at the chart and I looked at this doctor's note, and his note was like even scantier than anybody else's note. I mean, his
He
note
didn't do anything.
he didn't do anything. It's like his note was like nothing, not a, Gornish bupkis. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking to myself, so I asked the guy, I said, well, how come this doctor was, you thought was such a wonderful doctor? And he says, and he was almost in tears in this. And he said, the doctor said to me, he said, Joe, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. That's all he said.
Huh.
And the thing about it is, I think this is about, no other doctor, all these experts, and great minds and all this experience. Nobody took the time to give him a compliment. Nobody took the time to say something like that. And that's what this is. It's about the power of praise. And it's easy. And here's the other thing, Katie, it's easy to give a compliment. You could say, well, Mavis, your blood pressure's looking good today. Or, Earl, you lost some weight here. Good job. Or, Rocky, well, there's some nice tattoos you got there. So you can always find some, it's obvious stuff, tangible stuff you can compliment. But how do you compliment a guy that's fighting a losing battle every day?
Right.
And this doctor had the wisdom to do this. It's the power of praise.
Yeah.
Such a simple thing. It took 3 seconds to
And it
say
made
something
such a
like
difference.
that. Such a difference.
Well,
You're
and
right.
the interesting thing about that is that the person that the doctor praised was not the patient, right? The patient was the wife. And
Exactly.
sometimes we forget that, we see our patients and we forget that when we see a husband, the wife's part of the deal. Like
Yes.
we've got to acknowledge both of those. And so I think that's so cool that the doctor could see that this husband had his hands full.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time, and had the wisdom to praise the husband
The
who wasn't the patient.
That's right. And Katie, that's such a great point that you make. There's another story in the book about this. It's about the caregiver and what there's like. So this is actually a friend of mine. This wasn't a patient. So this friend of mine, he was in his 30s, and he was a healthy person, didn't smoke, jogged 5 miles a day, and he developed a lung cancer that became metastatic. And for 2 years, he went in for treatment to Kaiser, and the wife had to quit her job, and she was taking care of him full time. And so this was years later, and I ran into her, and I said, I know that Mark got really good care at Kaiser and with the oncology and everything else. I know he got good care, but let me ask you this, because I'm curious about this. I said, so we did good in the technical part, but how did we do in the communication part?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, the doctors and nurses and hospice people, they were wonderful. They were kind, they were caring, they were compassionate. And then she said, but just once, I wish they would have asked about me.
Mm.
We sometimes forget that it's the caregiver that needs the compassion.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I actually think that was in your book. I remember reading at least something similar to that, but it's
Yeah,
a good point.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
So important.
Perfect. Well, I love that one. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one is arguably my favorite. I can't tell you how many times I think about this one
Okay.
because I hear it all the time, but it's body odor. And I told you I love this one.
Yeah.
So tell me about body odor.
Okay. So one of the principles that we try to teach is that with every patient, try to make one empathic statement, just one empathic statement with every patient. And so we're doing this, and we're talking to a group of clinicians and physicians that are coming in, and we're going through this through this part of the workshop. And and a doctor comes up to me afterwards and he says, I just don't buy that. If I'm not feeling it, if I'm not feeling compassion, I can't make an empathic statement. He says, it's not authentic, it's not real, it's not me, it's not natural. And you get that, even though people don't say it, this is their natural, this is what they will say.
All the time. I hear that all the time.
It's
Yeah.
not natural, right? So unfortunately, what I thought of to say to him, how sometimes when you're getting to a confrontation or something with somebody, you can't think of what to say right away. And then like 30 minutes later, you think about it. You say, why didn't I say that? Yes. So that's the beauty of writing something. So I could write it now. So what I wished I would have said is something like this. I would say, okay, you want natural? Body odor is natural. But most of us, we put on fresh clothes, we take a shower, we put on deodorant. All we're saying is let's put a little Old Spice on our conversation.
Yes.
And here's the thing, Katie. And if we were really real, if we were really authentic, if we were really natural, we'd be saying something like this. We'd be saying this. Listen, Ms. Goldfarb, if I hear about your not being regular, one more time, I am going to walk over to your assisted living position and I am going to give you a high colonic personally. I mean, that's what we would say if we were really natural.
Right.
But here's the thing. Here's the bottom line about this, Katie, is making that empathic statement, and it could be about anything, gee, must have been tough finding parking, must have been tough, waiting 3 weeks for this appointment, must be tough, whatever. You can always make some empathic statement. And even though that empathic statement, you may not be feeling compassion at the time, but hopefully what we are feeling, what is natural, what is authentic, is our desire to help people. And if we can help them and build connection and build trust by making an empathic statement, that's what it's about.
Yes. And I thought, after I read this part of your book, I thought to myself, whoever said that what comes natural is the right thing to do? We know it's not. I would sleep in, I would stay up late, I would eat homemade cookies and cinnamon rolls, I wouldn't work hard. I mean, we know in life that what comes natural is not the thing to do, right? We know that.
Exactly. That's why we have the 10 Commandments, right? I mean, we got to curb our appetite somehow.
Right. So I just thought, it's exactly the same here, where it is not natural for a lot of people. In fact, it's really unnatural for a lot of people to connect with others. But just like you said, we shower, we put on fresh clothes, we throw on a little deodorant. It goes a long ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that one. I'm going to think about that probably till the day I die. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. The next one that I wanted to chat about was the myth of compassion fatigue. And there was kind of a lot in here, but the part that I loved is how talking about putting yourself in their shoes.
This came about because I was thinking to myself, at the end of the day, I was looking over my chart, my patients that I saw, and I said to myself, how many of these patients did I really feel genuine compassion for? I mean, and a lot of them had significant problems and, that are worthy of compassion, not just, a bump on the knee or something. And I said to myself, now let me examine this. Let me go through this list. How many of these patients did I really feel compassion for? And a lot of days, that compassion meter was like maybe 2% or maybe even less.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, how can we bring up that compassion meter to maybe 20%, 50%. But see, the thing is that a lot of us say, here's what a lot of people say I hear this so often. Oh, I didn't feel any, I've got compassion fatigue, I just got compassion fatigue. And to me, that's a lie. It's a myth. It's something we tell ourselves, because it's like you're saying to yourself, oh my God, my heart is so big, my heart is bursting. I burst with so much compassion. Now I have nothing left to give. But I think that in a lot of us, it's not that we have too much compassion and we used it all up and our tank is empty. I don't believe we had the compassion in the first place
Mm,
because in a lot of situations we are just working so hard with the daily hustle, where we got 3 work-ins, we go back in our office, there's 15 secure messages, we got to do prescriptions, jury excuses, so forth, we're late for the next patient, they're not happy, and we're just caught up in the daily hustle of the practice that we don't have time to give any compassion. It's not that we've drained of it, we're just not giving any.
mhm.
To me, that is the myth of compassion fatigue. And so I asked myself, and so I thought about it and said, I wonder how we could increase our compassion meter to like maybe 50%, 25%. And fortunately, I had a patient come in, Christina Lewis, and Christina Lewis is works at Kaiser. She's in our member assistance program. She's the member assistant program, one of the clinics, which means patient complaint department. She was a very wise young lady. And I said to her, Christina, you work in this really tough area. You're in the patient complaint department, and all day long you're hearing patients come in and they're complaining about waiting in the doctor's exam room for 45 minutes. They can't find parking. They have to wait at home for the doctor's phone call, and you hear this all day long, and a lot of people, I bet, are taking it out on you. Says, how do you do it? How do you manage? And she says, sometimes it is tough. And then she told me really the secret. This is just such great wisdom. It's probably the greatest wisdom about doctor patient communication. Here's what she said. She said, well, what I try to do is put myself in the patient's shoes. And I try to imagine what it would be like, what would it be like if I'm waiting 45 minutes to see the doctor and I have to pick up my child at daycare, how frazzled and how frustrated I might feel. She says, I try to think what it would be like if I have an appointment. I'm spending 20 minutes trying to find a parking place. She says, I try to imagine what it would be like at home with my sick child waiting for the doctor's phone call, waiting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I try to put myself in their shoes. And I think that is such a wise answer. And if we as physicians or clinicians, if we can put ourselves in our patient's shoes, so when that person comes in, let's say with, chronic back pain, we might imagine, what it's like to not be able to ride a bike with your son because of the back pain. Or someone comes in with a nighttime cough, we might imagine what it's like to be up at night. Try to put yourself in
Mhm.
their shoes. Or someone comes in with a tension headache, but is worried, lying awake at night, thinking it might be a brain tumor. If we can put ourselves in their shoes and try to imagine what it's like, I really think that is the key. And to feeling compassion. When we feel compassion, really, it brings joy and meaning to our lives as professionals. And finally, I got to tell you though, Katie, it's like I think I figured out the answer, but it's still tough.
It's
It's
hard to
still
implement.
tough. It's
Yeah.
still tough. You because you still got 3 work-ins. You're still an hour behind. People are not happy with the way things. You got all 20 inbox messages. It's not hard. But what I tried to do is every patient that came, I tried to do that. With every patient, every visit. And I know some people it comes natural to. Some people it just comes natural. It didn't come natural to me. I had to work at it, and I still have to work at it. But God bless you if it comes natural to you and you just feel that. And there are some people like that, and all I can say is God bless you.
Well, and I love when you told me that earlier when we were chatting that it didn't come natural for you. I love that because when I talk to you, you're very easy to connect with. When I read this book, I'm so impressed with everything you learned. It emphasized to me that this can be taught. It can be
Yes.
learned. And And you
Absolutely.
can improve no matter where you're at. You can improve a little bit, and a little goes a long way with
Yeah.
stuff like this.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I often think when I'm seeing patients, I think, what would I do? And you probably have this. You'll have family members call you and ask for your medical advice, right? They'll say, "Hey, can I run this by you?" A neighbor will say, "Hey, what do you think?" And so I often think when I'm seeing patients that are not my friends or neighbors or family, I think, what would I want done if this was my mom? What
Yeah.
would I want done if this was my brother?
Yeah.
And I, again, like you said, it's hard, but I try to go about seeing patients like that,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that light.
If you can just flip that mind switch, is like, and that's a great thing. What's it like in their shoes? Or that's another way is if they were my loved one, what would I be doing? Uh, if we can just make that mental switch and think like that. But again, it's tough. We're up against this. But you're right. These are things that can be taught. And at Kaiser, I can tell you, we would have these uh, member patient scores. The
Yeah.
patients would sign these surveys about how things, and we saw dramatic increases and especially we would do special programs with those who had low scores, and we'd do special intensive programs, and we saw tremendous progress. And yes, it didn't come easy for me, and I think that was a good thing because we had this endeavor where we found the top performers as far as their patient scores, right? The
Hmm.
patient satisfaction scores. We took the top 1% and we got them into a room, and we said, what are your secrets? What do you tell us? What are you doing? You guys are fantastic. And the problem is that they all really didn't know.
Yeah. They
they
didn't
didn't
think they
know.
were doing anything.
They didn't know. They said, well, and finally you'd say, well, yeah, but what did you do? What do you do? What do you do? And basically it comes down to, they just say, I just I just treat people like I'd like to be treated.
Huh.
And sort of that's their default position. That's their natural position. And they don't you have any special strategies or techniques or stuff like that. But a lot of us, we really need those strategies and techniques, and they can really believe me, I'm the poster child of communication, improvement. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. I love that. All right. The next one that I loved was play ball. Do you remember that one?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, play ball, yeah. So I told you that one of the principles of our communication program was make an empathic statement,
Hmm.
give a compliment. Another one of our principles is reflected in this vignette about play ball. So I'm in my clinic, and my nurse is banging on my door. And she says, Abramson, you better get out here. Your 130 patient is causing a ruckus in the waiting room. So I go out there in the waiting room. And there's this guy. He's about 50 years old. He's got this Ford Motor Company hat on. And he's sort of pronouncing to a room full of patients. He says, I ain't waiting. I'm losing money. I ain't waiting. I'm losing money. I was running about 45 minutes late. And
Yeah.
so I go out there and I say, sir, you know what? I'm sort of backed up here today. I'll be with you in 30 minutes. He goes, I ain't waiting. I'm losing money. Uh, Sir, okay, how about 20 minutes? 20 minutes, I promise. I ain't waiting. I'm losing money. Okay, we settle on 50. And I'm sitting here I am, like I'm a specialist. I'm a high school graduate, and I'm
Yeah.
dickering with this lunatic in the waiting room in front of a whole bunch of patients. So finally, the guy comes in, and he was not happy to see me. I was not thrilled to see him. And we're sitting and we're faced off. And it turned out he comes in for back pain.
Hmm.
And now he didn't want narcotics. He didn't want to be off work. He wasn't suing his boss. And it was this chronic back pain that he's had for a long time. And and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, what does this guy want? I mean, he doesn't want drugs. He doesn't want off work, and he's not got a lawsuit going. I mean, I hate to be cynical, but what could
What
he
can I
want?
do? Yeah.
What can he want from me? And so I was just, I was ready to go into my usual litany of back pain history and so forth. And then I remembered one of the questions. This was recently after I'd taken, this course and learned the principles. And one of the principles of the course is get patient perspective. Get patient perspective. Now, getting patient perspective is not about like, oh, which arm is hurting? Is it pain tingling or burning, or does it hurt on Tuesdays? And that's not patient perspective. Patient perspective is asking very deep questions or deeper questions. So one of the questions that we ask is, and this is one I went with. I said, "Sir, how is this back pain affecting your life?"
Hmm.
And the guy became quiet, and then his voice kind of softened, and he said to me, "I have a 12-year-old son, and I can't play catch with him."
Hmm.
Now, when he told me that, it really resonated because years ago when my son was about that age, I had a very bad pinched nerve, and it was I couldn't do anything with my arm, and I was off work for about 6 weeks, the only time I was ever off work in my career. And at that time, I remember thinking to myself, I may never be able to play catch again with my son.
Hmm.
And so after after and I shared that with him, and we talked about this. We talked about having sons. We talked about playing catch. We talked about baseball. And afterwards, and I'm not saying that I had any cure for his back pain, but two things happened. Number one is that he wasn't angry anymore. We had connection. We had built connection, and we built some trust. So some of the things that I might have suggested to him, I think he was probably more likely to try than if we hadn't had that connection. So
Hmm.
part of the outcome of this was, he was leaving the room in a happier state of mind, in a better state of mind. And not only was he leaving, but I was leaving because I felt good about that connection. Even though I didn't make any cures or anything like that, he still got the back pain. But I really felt I connected to a human being. And if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't asked that simple question, we might have gotten into it and it had been a kind of a nasty, hostile thing, and he might have walked out losing money, and I would have walked out. Oh, God, had gone home. Oh God, you wouldn't believe the day I had, honey. It was just terrible. I met this guy. It was so nasty. But it didn't. It didn't. And just to say, that is the goal. That is the goal of this whole communication business. It's number one. It's patient outcome. Because if patients connect with you, they'll trust you. If they trust you, they'll follow your advice. If they follow your advice, they're going to have a better patient outcome. And it's also clinician outcome because
Yes.
if you can leave clinic at the end of the day and say, God, I feel good about what I was doing. I may not have cured anything, but I connected with people. And I can tell you this, Katie, the first 20 years, I told you the first 20 years, I just did the regular thing. I did the find it, fix it, explain it type stuff. And I was competent and I was pretty good. And I thought, and all that. But I retired when I was 72 years old, and I could have retired like a lot of people, in the early 60s. And people were saying, why don't you retire? You can retire. You got a great pension. I said, no, this is too much fun because the last 20 years I was doing this communication work and I was implementing it in my practice. And my practice was not just find it, fix it, explain it, blah, blah, blah. It was like really having connection with people. And it really brought so much joy and meaning into those last 20 years. That's why. And I probably still wouldn't have retired, but my wife said she'd divorce me if I didn't. So.
Well, and I love that when you told me that, when you said I probably would have retired 20 years earlier, other than I started finding joy and connecting with patients,
Yeah,
that struck such a resonance with me because I think that's probably half the problem in burnout that
yeah,
we see in clinicians these days is they're not finding joy
yeah,
in their work.
Yeah.
And I love in this section you said it's important to find out what matters
Yeah.
and not focus so much on what's the matter. Just
Yeah.
like you said, not so
Yeah.
much in that fix it, find it mentality, but what matters.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's funny. I work in a clinic where I often, probably 60% of the patients I see, I'm able to take care of on my own, treat out the door, they're happy. The other 40%, it's beyond my scope. And so I'm referring, I'm sending in to different people. And I've found a lot of times a patient will come in and I know within the first 30 seconds that it's not something I'm going to be able to help them with.
Yeah.
And so, I could say, oh, sorry, you need to go see Scott, the neurologist, right?
Yeah.
But I've found that if I take more time, even though I'm pretty sure I'm right, if I take more time to find out what matters, just like you said, okay, how is this affecting you? So this seems to be a really big deal and it's been going on for this long. What are some of the other symptoms that are going on? And then I say, I really think we need to get you in with a neurologist so we can get to the bottom of this. This is something we need to try to get fixed for you. It's a
Yeah.
totally different outcome if it probably takes me 1 to 2 extra minutes. It's not like I do it a long time. But when
Yeah.
I kind of find out what matters
Yeah.
to them and how this is affecting them,
Yeah.
totally different outcome. They leave happy, I leave happy, and guess what? I didn't even help them. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't even do anything,
Well,
right?
you did, because you know what? Because you did help them, because you know what? They found someone who cared about them, who cared to hear what they had to say. And that's what matters. And it is. And in this, I think this is in the book, but um, and that's what I say, that this idea of communication can come down to just one word, and it's a simple word, and nobody ever gets the word, and the word is THE. If you eliminate that word, it's an opportunity to make connection. You could say, okay, my job is to find out what's the matter. Okay, you've got headaches. Okay, which side of the head, how long? Oh, okay, well, I think these headaches are clearly allergy headaches. Let me give you this medicine, and call me in 2 weeks. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's you're doing your job, you're competent, you made the diagnosis, you gave the right treatment. And that's what's the matter. If you get rid of the word the, and you think to yourself, what matters? So you might see this same headache patient, and you get okay, it's allergies, so forth. But if you just add this one question and you say, so tell me, was there anything? It sounds like these are allergies, but is there anything you were concerned about? Anything you were feared that these headaches might represent? What were your
Hmm.
fears about this? And then you may get a response like, well, doc, uh, I think you're right. It's allergies now. But you know what? My Uncle Joe had a brain tumor and his headaches were kind of like mine, I think. And I'm just wondering, I know it's probably not like, but I'm just wondering, could this be a brain tumor? And then you get to
Mm.
opportunity to say, to reassure them that it wasn't. So that patient goes home, and says, honey, how was your appointment? In the first case, well, yeah, the doctor gave me some allergy pills. It was all right. Second case, you know, how was your appointment? Well, gosh, I feel so much better, so much better. I got to tell you, I was waking up wondering about this being a brain tumor. I know it's silly, but I really couldn't get it out of my mind. And thank God the doctor reassured me. So that's what matters. That's what really mattered to this person, was
Right.
getting rid of the fear that it was a brain tumor. She's going home with this wonderful sense of relief. And as you as a clinician, it's not just writing a prescription for an allergy pill. You can go home and say, man, I I relieved somebody's great fear. What a blessing that was. I feel so good about what I did. I didn't just give an allergy pill. I relieved someone of their deep fear. So
Wow.
that's what we're talking about, is it's about what matters, not what's the matter. Get rid of the. Oh, you have to do you have to get that. But in addition, what matters, and it doesn't
Wow.
take time. It doesn't take time. As a matter of fact, it probably will save time, because because that patient now trusts you.
Yeah.
and they're not going to, and if they had any doubts about the allergy pill, they're, maybe they're going to say, no, that doctor cared about me. I'm going to take it. It
I love
saves
that.
time. Yeah.
Well, and a really simple example from my work is I see a lot of patients with sinus infections, right? They come in with 2 days of sinus congestion. And in my mind, I'm thinking of that patient who says, I know I need an antibiotic. I get these
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So I kind of go off on my dialogue of, it's only been 2 days. It's very likely a virus, antibiotic resistant. I go off on my spiel, and the
Yeah.
patient at the end of it says, yeah, I agree. I've had a hard time sleeping at night because of the drainage. I was wondering if I could get something for my cough and maybe a work note for a day or two. And
Yeah.
then I feel like I've spent 5 minutes giving my
Yeah.
best spiel on antibiotics. And guess
Yeah.
what? I
Yeah.
didn't know what mattered to the patient.
Yeah.
They totally were on my side. They needed something different than what I thought. And so really even something as simple as saying, how can I best help you today? Or how are you hoping I can help? And really easily you can see, okay, this is what this patient needs. I've learned that is helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know what? All they need is an empathic word. So let's say that patient comes to see you with it that thinks they've got a viral infection. They think they want antibiotics, or they banned on antibiotics. You know how I ain't leaving till I get my antibiotics, or I ain't leaving till you give Junior the antibiotics. I'm up with him
Yep.
all night long. You better give me, who's your chief, all that. And you could spend your time, giving them the Mayo Clinic data about viruses and this. You could spend your 5 minutes giving your spiel about what virus it is. And you're probably still going to get, I ain't leaving till I get my antibiotics. And then you're going to have to bargain and this and that. But what if you were to say just make some empathic statement. Say, you know what? Gosh, that must be tough being up all night with your kid. Must be tough. Then you got to go to work the next day. Gosh, I know it's tough with my kids too. And and then the guy might be the guy, you're right, Doc. It's so tough. And you know, Patty left me with the kids, and we're going through a divorce. It's really tough. And oh my God, oh, I'm
And
so
suddenly change. Yep.
suddenly all you
It
did was make an
changes.
empathic statement, and there's no and you've made the connection. You've developed trust. The doctor knows you care. This antibiotic versus viral thing, it's not even an issue. And
Yep.
you saved yourself. You saved yourself that 5 minute spiel back and forth, Mayo Clinic, Journal of Pediatrics, all that stuff. You don't need it.
Because you were empathetic. Yep.
You just making an empathic statement. Wow, must be tough being up all night with your kids. And then just shut up. And then just shut up and see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. Last one is, have you hugged your cleaning lady today?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I love that. So what happened is, I told you about that time I had the pinched nerve in my arm.
Yeah.
And it was the only time in my life I ever missed a day of work, and I was out for 6 weeks. It was really, really painful. It was a brachial neuritis. So I went to see the neurologist, my local Kaiser, a guy by the name of Dr. Jay Whaley, a wonderful guy. And so I'm leaving. He sent me down for an X-ray. I go to the X-ray clerk. I give her the slip, and she looks at the slip. She looks at me and she says, "Oh, Dr. Whaley is your doctor. What a nice man." Now, I mean, I know Jay, and he's a wonderful guy. So I didn't need to tell me, but I really appreciated hearing that from this registration clerk. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, what if, you know, she had the feeling that Dr. Whaley was not such a nice guy. So what if when I presented that X-ray slip to her, she looks at the slip, she looks back and says, "Oh, oh, your doctor is Whaley. Oh God," rolled her eyes or something.
Right.
What would I be thinking? And it just goes to show that our staff can be such tremendous assets in caring for our patients. There's a um, reception clerk, as reception clerk at one of the stations where I work, and she's a wonderful person. And anyway, she has a sign. It says her name, reception clerk, and underneath it, it says director of first impressions.
Yes.
Because these people,
Yes.
so how that got to be a cleaning woman story is I remembered I'd reading somewhere on the internet. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's on the internet.
Right.
Must be true. I don't know.
It's true.
So yeah, it's true. So there was this Johns Hopkins professor at a medical school, first year medical students, and he gives this pop quiz. There's 10 questions. And the first 9 questions are like, what bug causes this disease and so forth, typical questions. The last question was, what is the name of the cleaning woman in this building? So the medical students fill out, they do the test, and when they get to the 10th question, they go berserk. And they do what medical students do. They gripe and they moan and they bitch. And they say to the professor, what does this have to do with medicine?
Yeah.
And the professor says, this question has everything to do with medicine.
Wow.
Everything to do with medicine. Because can you imagine, let's say you're walking to your appointment and you don't know where the doctor is, and you see a cleaning woman, you ask her, and the cleaning woman says, oh, you're gonna see nurse practitioner Wyatt. What a sweet lady, what a nice lady. You will love seeing her. She's so nice. You've already
You've won.
got 90.
Yeah.
And this happened actually to me personally. I experienced this personally in another way. My wife, when my son was very little, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, he had an ear problem. It wasn't anything serious or anything, but they referred him to see the ear, nose, and throat specialist. So my wife goes to see the ear, nose, and throat specialist, and I come home that day. I said, "How did the appointment go?" She said, "The appointment went fine. That doctor is tops in his field." Now I'm thinking to myself, because I'm in the communication business here, how this was just a routine ear clinic, right? A routine ear problem, nothing serious. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. How did she come away with this feeling that this guy is tops in his field? How did she do that? How did this doctor make patients feel he's tops in his field? And I started grilling my wife, and I said, how do you know he's tops in his field? What makes you think he's tops in his field? How do you know that? And she looked at me like I'd landed from Saturn or something, and she says, well, the nurse who put Jeremy in the room told me so.
Huh.
So imagine the connection between that doctor and his nurse. And if we all could have those connections between our doctor, between our medical assistants or nurses and us, we could all be tops in our field.
Yeah. Well, and it makes such a huge difference. Before I was a nurse practitioner, I was a nurse, right? And I worked in the hospital. And when you're a nurse, you become acutely aware of the physicians that treat you with respect and those that do not.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, you would way rather care for someone's patient who treats you with respect, who, if you have to call them in the middle of the night, they're not going to yell
Yeah.
at you. I mean, it's just night and day difference. But guess what? Guess who's with the patient 24/7? Me, the nurse, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just amazing as we talk about patients being satisfied, right? If we have a nurse or a medical assistant, whoever who's there with the patient most of the time, who's just managing up, who's speaking well of the doctor or the clinician, I mean, that goes so far as to the patient's perception of
Exactly.
that provider. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I knew you were going to be like this before I even started your book, because in your acknowledgement section at the very beginning of your book, you gave acknowledgement to your former medical assistant, and you said, who has more common sense than 99% of all the physicians I have known, including myself. and I thought, there
Yeah.
is a doctor who has spent his career showing respect to all of his colleagues, not just fellow physicians, but to all of his colleagues.
Oh,
That is a physician that I want to work for. That's a physician that everyone wants to work for, is someone who writes something like that in their acknowledgement. So thank you. I knew that about you just from the first page of your book.
Katie, thank you for remembering that and taking that to heart. And the medical assistant, that you're mentioning was Susan Garcia. She was my medical assistant for a long, long time. And she had, I think she got married right out of high school and had a child, and then went back to school to learn medical assisting and so forth. She later on divorced, but she has such wisdom. I used to go, this is really true. I would see this patient. I didn't know what to say to the patient. I was puzzled. I didn't know what to do. Not from a technical point of view, but just the relationship part of things. I'd say, Sue, I don't know what to say to this guy. I don't know what to do, and and she just had such, like, I remember there was this similar to that patient that the doctor made me feel so happy. I
Mm-hmm.
said, what can I tell this person? And she said, Dr. A, just tell him that he's doing the best he can. Just tell him he's doing the best he can. And that was, and I use, and ever since then, that's, and it's something a phrase that I've used. You know what? Things are not looking good. It's going downhill. But and again, the caregiver type thing. You're doing the best you can, or the patient. You're doing the best you can. Give a compliment. Give
Yeah,
empathic.
and that was advice from your medical assistant
Yep,
who advised
exactly.
you to do that.
Oh, I can't tell you how many situations she got me out of. I tell you.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I love this. I honestly would love to talk about all of these with you because I just think you have such wisdom. But I just want you to know how much I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And I think it's going to bless a lot of people's lives who listen to this and try to make little changes. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate your asking me on here and reading my book and so forth.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're a patient and have a great story about a time that a healthcare provider gave you awesome care, or you're a healthcare provider who has a story about a colleague or yourself who gave incredible care, I want to hear about it. Reach out to me at Medical Manners on Instagram or send an email to Katie, Katie, at medicalmanners.com. Together, we can transform the way we deliver healthcare by transforming the way we connect. Take care.